On December 1st, 2025, in front of dozens of blazing cameras inside the Grand Hall of Buckingham Palace, King Charles III slowly put his pen to a thick stack of documents. His voice dropped, resonating clearly through the suffocating tension in the room. I have stayed silent long enough, and my silence has been abused. The entire chamber seemed to freeze. William stood behind his father, his hands clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Catherine lowered her head slightly, her eyes avoiding the cameras, as if hiding a sorrow she could not name. And Meghan, half a world away, was facing an unprecedented scenario in the history of the British royal family. As the reigning king himself chose to sue his own daughter-in-law, why did Charles choose to take such a forceful action? What caused the royal family's patience to finally run dry after 4 long years of escalating conflict? And is this lawsuit pushing the monarchy toward a point of no return, one that could fracture what little unity remains? In this video, we will dive into everything behind that unprecedented decision, from years of accumulating tension, the secret meetings inside the palace that no one knew about, to the true roles of William and Catherine behind the scenes. We will also revisit Oprah Winfrey's late regret, analyze the legal basis that led to the lawsuit, and uncover the explosive public reaction of 2025. To understand why this lawsuit erupted in a way never before seen in royal family history, we need to go back to the moment when everything truly began. On a sunny afternoon in March 2021, in the garden of a California mansion, the interview between Oprah Winfrey and Harry and Meghan began as a seemingly calm television moment, but quickly became an earthquake that shook the entire British monarchy. The lighting was soft, slanting through the trees, creating a warm, intimate feeling. But the cameras standing silently around them felt like cold, watchful eyes waiting for something explosive. Oprah looked at Meghan and asked her opening question in a steady tone. Meghan took a deep breath, as if preparing for a confession that would change everything. The moment Meghan spoke, the air seemed to thicken. She talked about isolation, about long days inside the palace with no one to turn to, about feeling suffocated by hundreds of rules no one ever explained. Then came the sentence that exploded across the world, spoken with a trembling but determined voice. There were conversations within the family about how dark my child's skin might be when he was born. Oprah's eyes widened, and she almost shouted, "What?" In that moment, the entire set fell silent. No one moved, not a breath of air. Only the story of racism being spoken aloud to millions of viewers around the globe. Meghan continued with her confession about her mental health. "I no longer wanted to live. I asked for help, and no one helped me." Her words fell slowly like heavy drops of water, each one opening a painful image of despair. Harry sat beside her, his eyes red, his hand gripping hers tightly. He spoke about feeling trapped, about his family not understanding him, about the coldness of the institution. Oprah kept pressing with questions that pulled emotions to the surface, and each answer pushed the royal family deeper into a defensive corner in the eyes of the world. As soon as the interview aired, inside Buckingham Palace, a completely different atmosphere took over. Charles sat motionless in his office, watching the interview play out on the television in front of him. He said nothing. It was said that Charles remained frozen for several minutes, his eyes fixed on Meghan as she described feeling mistreated. His private secretary entered, but no one dared to interrupt. The prince, who once carried the weight of the monarchy, was now facing the harshest accusation any royal family could endure. Down the hall, William was so tense he could barely contain his anger. He sprang up from his seat and spoke loudly in a closed room with only a few trusted aides. "This is a direct attack on my family." His voice carried the tone of a protector, not only defending the monarchy but defending his father and Catherine, who had been dragged into the storm unwillingly. William saw the accusations of racism as not only a distortion but an insult to his family's honor. It was one of the rare moments when William revealed such intense fury, and it showed just how grave the crisis had become. Catherine, the person mentioned in Meghan's story, chose silence, but the sadness in her eyes could not be hidden. When she heard Meghan recall that she had made Catherine cry, and then claimed that the story had been reversed by the press. Catherine quietly lowered her head. She knew she could not speak out. She could not refute anything. She could not defend herself in front of the media. Being pushed into the center of a battle between two families left Catherine both hurt and powerless. On top of that was the responsibility of being William's emotional anchor during those turbulent days. Outside the palace, global public opinion was fiercely divided. In the United States, Meghan was seen by many as a symbol of a victim brave enough to expose injustice. On social media, the hashtag #WeStand, with Meghan spread within hours. Hollywood stars voiced their support. Television programs debated endlessly. But in the United Kingdom, the atmosphere was completely different. Tabloids reacted with fury, calling the interview a stab in the back of the royal family. The British people split into two clear sides: royalists versus supporters of Meghan, like a Cold War taking place across the media. Television debates stretched on for hours, revolving around questions of who was right and who was wrong, and whether the royal family could still be considered a symbol of unity for the country. The more people watched, the more the interview became the center of an unprecedented public conflict. Royalists insisted the accusations were exaggerated and even irresponsible. Meghan's supporters argued it was a cry for help from a woman under immense pressure. No matter which side one belonged to, no one could deny that the interview created a deep fracture in the image of the British monarchy, a fracture many believed would take a long time to heal. Inside the royal family, the feeling of betrayal crept into every private meeting. Meghan's comments about racism struck at the most sensitive point because it was not an accusation against one person, but against the entire institution. Those who had tried to stay calm in previous years, when the Sussexes spoke out, now realized that this was not just an interview. It was the moment that marked a clear dividing line between two worlds. And from that moment on, the conflicts began to accumulate over time. The Oprah interview was only the first explosion, an event that made the whole world turn its head. But what unfolded in the years that followed was what truly pushed the royal family to the brink of total collapse. The documentaries, the controversial memoir, the series of public remarks, and the gradual breakdown all became a rising wave that no one could stop. But Oprah was only the beginning. What truly pushed the family to the edge lay in the years that followed. The lighting in the 2022 Netflix documentary spread across Meghan and Harry's faces like a thin layer of cold mist, creating the sense that viewers were witnessing a testimony delivered before the entire world. The two sat facing the camera, without avoidance or hesitation, as if ready to open every hidden corner of the royal family that they believed had harmed their small family. The setting was arranged to be both intimate and tense, with soft lighting sharp enough to capture every slight shift in their eyes and every heavy breath Harry took whenever he mentioned the memories he said he could never forgive. Meghan appeared calm, but her eyes reflected years of pent-up resentment. The atmosphere in the room made viewers feel as if they were watching a tight string ready to snap. Their accounts of the royal family shocked the entire United Kingdom. Meghan spoke of the coldness she felt, of distorted conversations, of feeling lost inside a family full of tradition but lacking warmth. Harry went even further. He described family meetings that felt like confrontations in the invisible pressure he had carried since childhood. Netflix presented everything as a deliberately crafted dramatic picture, creating an impact more powerful than anything seen before. Most striking were the details concerning Catherine. Meghan's descriptions of their first meeting and the coldness she claimed was a hallmark of the royal family put Catherine's image under intense scrutiny. Viewers didn't simply follow the story. They analyzed every expression and every word, and as if participating in a psychological investigation searching for hidden motives beneath the surface. The situation quickly became a global flashpoint. British media reacted aggressively, while American media showed more sympathy toward Meghan. The sharp divide in public opinion created an endless wave of debate. And inside Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere grew heavier than ever. Charles, who had only recently ascended the throne at the time, felt the honor of his family dragged through the mud in front of hundreds of millions of people. A close advisor later revealed that the king viewed the film as an act of open warfare. Charles did not rage with shouting. He was described as raging in silence. He withdrew into private meetings, keeping a calm face but carrying exhaustion in his eyes. For a man who had lived his entire life within the bounds of tradition, seeing his own son place their family's private struggles on a global platform was a heavy blow to royal pride. William was affected even more directly. In the film, Harry revealed details that emphasized the conflict between the two brothers. The heir to the throne, long seen as measured and composed, suddenly found himself under intense scrutiny. Catherine, though she never said a word, was pulled into the storm as assumptions and rumors about her personality continued to spread. But even those turbulent waves were not the peak. In 20, Harry's memoir Spare was released and almost instantly exploded across international media. The pages were filled with childhood memories, arguments with William, and moments of a family torn apart. The stories were told with such detail that the public was stunned. One of the most shocking was the incident in which William grabbed Harry by the collar and pushed him to the floor during an argument about Meghan. The story spread at the speed of light, dealing serious damage to William's public image. Many who had long viewed him as the embodiment of calmness were now forced to confront a different truth, or at least a different perspective, that Harry placed before the world. In the book, Harry also described his emotional distance from his father. Although he insisted that he loved Charles, he made no effort to hide his disappointment over his father's silence during the most turbulent years of his life. Harry described several moments when his father, in his view, had chosen the monarchy instead of choosing his own son. Those words tightened the hearts of readers and placed the king in an even more difficult position under public pressure. The revelations in Spare hurt Charles more deeply than anything before. A close aide recalled that after reading the passages about himself, Charles sighed and said one despairing sentence. He said he no longer knew what Harry and Meghan wanted from him. It was not the cry of an angry man. It was the confession of a father who felt powerless. The combination of the Netflix documentary and the memoir Spare was like two spears aimed at the most vulnerable points of the royal family. Centuries of tradition suddenly felt fragile when faced with the force of modern media. The more the public debated, the wider the distance grew between family members. People in the United Kingdom began to question the king's ability to hold the monarchy together during such a turbulent era. But the reason the glass finally overflowed did not lie only in the insults. It lay in the king's increasingly fragile condition. For when Netflix and Spare created waves that threatened to sink the royal image, another event, quiet yet merciless, changed King Charles's thinking entirely. It was the health crisis of 2024. From that moment on, his path was no longer the same. The year 2024 became an unforgettable milestone for the royal family when both King Charles and Princess Catherine were diagnosed with cancer. The news shocked the nation and left the entire family drowning in suffocating anxiety. For Charles, who had long maintained a calm and somewhat distant public persona, the realization that his own body was betraying him day by day was an alarm bell that forced him to think about larger matters. The honor of the monarchy, the stability of the throne, and the legacy he would leave for his children and for the United Kingdom. All of those suddenly became more important than ever, as illness reminded him that time was limited. Charles increasingly realized that he could not allow narratives about his family to be controlled by others, shaped by one-sided accounts, emotional arguments, or commercially driven stories created by Meghan and Harry. He could not allow the world's view of the monarchy, of his own son, and of his grandchildren to be distorted by baseless accusations. During treatments and through sleepless nights, the question grew louder in his mind. Was he leaving behind a monarchy weakened by endless scandals, or a strong institution capable of surviving the brutal storms of the modern media age? Illness changed Charles. He became more decisive, more direct, and far less patient with what he saw as distortions of the truth. And at the very moment he was fighting cancer, he had to witness Catherine, the daughter-in-law he loved like his own child, endure a similar illness. This made the words Meghan had spoken about Catherine in the Netflix documentary sting even more deeply. Compassion, anger, and worry blended into one powerful feeling that he had to protect his family, to protect the honor of the woman battling illness beside William. And from that feeling, the decision to pursue legal action gradually formed as something inevitable. However, Before taking legal action, Charles tried every possible way to resolve the conflict. For 2 years, he personally reached out to Meghan and Harry through multiple private calls. Advisors from both sides arranged confidential sessions in an effort to find a solution. Some meetings unfolded in complete silence. Others were so tense that a single sentence could freeze the entire room. At one point, an independent mediator was even brought in to help both sides find common ground. But every attempt failed. All efforts collapsed because the old misunderstandings still lingered, because distrust was never erased, and because the damage to their relationship had become too deep to repair. When reconciliation fell apart, the pressure from the British media pushed everything into a dead end. Tabloids exploited every minor detail, and front pages were filled with articles blaming both the royal family and the Sussexes. In the eyes of the public, the monarchy seemed to be losing control of its own narrative, and this made Charles feel as if the image of the institution itself was slowly being eroded. He understood that if he continued to remain silent, that silence would be interpreted in the worst possible way. He needed to regain control of the story, not only for himself, but for the future of the Windsor dynasty. And then, during a private meeting at Clarence House, with only a few close advisors and his most trusted lawyer, Charles said the sentence that would later be quoted across the world. His voice was firm, his hand clenched on the table. In his eyes, there was no longer the exhaustion of illness, but the determination of a king. He said, "I cannot allow silence to become complicity." That sentence marked the end of every remaining hesitation. From that moment, the decision to sue Meghan was officially approved. The atmosphere inside the palace after Charles's decision felt heavy and dense. The long corridors of Clarence House seemed even quieter than usual, and the silence carried the weight of a storm gathering strength. And exactly as the story had been building toward, in that most difficult moment, the two people who stood beside Charles the strongest and also the most controversial were William and Catherine. Their presence in this picture was not only an expression of family loyalty, but also a strategic force shaping the direction of the monarchy in a period of intense turbulence. William was the first to argue that the revelations from Harry and Meghan were not simply complaints or family frustrations. To him, all of it amounted to a genuine threat to the survival of the monarchy itself. A former advisor recalled that after reviewing the entire Oprah interview, the Netflix series and the sensitive chapters in Spare, William said through gritted teeth that they had crossed a red line no royal should ever cross. He believed that without a clear response, the family would continue to be led around by the narrative created by the Sussexes. This, according to William, was not only dangerous but could lead to the collapse of the fragile public trust that the royal family relied on. In private meetings with the king, William was always the most direct. He insisted that the royal family's restraint was being mistaken for weakness, and that the longer they stayed silent, the more the public believed the accusations from Meghan were true. His voice was usually low but sharp every time he spoke about the issue. Many witnesses said that his eyes always showed an unwavering determination to protect his family at any cost. For him, the most important thing was safeguarding the future of the monarchy, the very responsibility he and his children would carry when his time to reign eventually came. If William was the force of logic, Catherine was the voice of the heart and the accumulation of years of emotional wounds inflicted by the media. Since the 2022 Netflix documentary, Catherine had become the target of relentless criticism that many believed was unfair. Scenes in which Meghan described Catherine as cold, distant, or even cruel were etched into the minds of millions. Catherine, who was naturally private and rarely shared her true feelings, endured sleepless nights worrying about her image and fearing that the negativity would affect her children. In a private conversation with Charles, Catherine was said to have spoken gently but firmly, telling him that she did not want her children to grow up in an environment surrounded by distorted stories about their family. She believed that if they did not speak up, the accusations would become accepted as truth in the eyes of the public. The atmosphere in the room was described as so tense that even the slightest movement could have caused everything to break. Catherine spoke with a shaky yet determined voice. Charles remained silent, staring at her face for a long moment, As if reading every hidden pain inside the daughter-in-law he had always cherished, William and Catherine, two people with different approaches, ultimately met at the same point. In their late-night conversations at Adelaide Cottage, they concluded that a family cannot live forever in fear of being betrayed again. It was not just a statement, but a vow to protect each other from the chaos that had consumed them for years. They saw the exhaustion in Charles, a king forced to bear the fracture of his own family while battling illness, and they understood that if they did not stand beside him, no one else could. In the three-person meetings between Charles, William, and Catherine, the atmosphere was always extremely serious. Charles listened to every opinion, every analysis, and every concern that these two expressed. William emphasized the need to preserve the dignity of the monarchy. Catherine emphasized the necessity of protecting the next generations from media-inflicted harm. And the two of them together strengthened Charles's belief that he was doing the right thing. Many advisors later revealed that it was William and Catherine who helped Charles remain mentally steady during the most stressful days. They were often by his side, talking for hours about communication strategies, about risks, and also about emotions. Their support was not only moral encouragement, but also the leverage that pushed Charles toward an action he had long avoided because he feared it would cause irreversible consequences. And then, when their determination had grown strong enough, they became three arrows pointing toward the same goal. Once again, the British royal family showed that they could become their strongest when facing a shared challenge. And when William and Catherine made their firm stance unmistakably clear, when the two of them insisted that the family could no longer allow itself to be dragged into the endless chaos created by Harry and Meghan, it was at that very moment that a figure who had seemed to stand outside all developments began to feel a deepening sense of remorse day by day. A figure whose very presence in the year 2021 had laid the first brick that led to the unprecedented clash of the British royal family in the year 2025. That person was Oprah Winfrey. For decades, Oprah was seen as a powerful symbol of the media world. But after the explosive interview with Harry and Meghan, she began to see aftershocks that she had never anticipated. The accusations, the tears, and the stories of racism and injustice shook the world. But 3 years later, as she watched the royal crisis escalate to the point where a king had to sue his own daughter-in-law, Oprah understood that she had unintentionally opened a door that could no longer be closed. A close associate of Oprah recalled that in the final months of the year 2020, whenever she saw a news report about the British royal family, Oprah would stay silent for a very long time. She no longer expressed excitement about the so-called historic interview as she once did. Instead, there was a quiet worry, so strong that she once sighed and said, "If only I had known things would go this far." That sentence sounded like a confession, gentle yet heavy. Oprah's worries did not only come from the damage to the image of the royal family, they also came from the backlash toward herself. Oprah's brand in the United Kingdom suffered significant impact. Several media collaborations had to be paused. British audiences began to question whether Oprah had unintentionally taken sides and targeted the royal family. These debates made her feel that she was no longer an outsider, but had become a part of the whirlwind. But what troubled Oprah more than anything else had nothing to do with fame or money. She once told her team that the most haunting feeling was the realization that she had touched a family structure that was already fragile. And when that structure nearly collapsed, she understood that she had played no small role in setting the story in motion. On the first day of December in the year 25, when Oprah saw the images of King Charles III signing the legal documents to sue Meghan, she was said to have frozen for a few seconds. She had once been the messenger who carried the most explosive accusations in modern royal history. And now she was witnessing every fragment of that crisis being gathered into an unprecedented legal event, a battle that only needed one glance to recognize that it had been fueled by words, by interviews, and by conflicts that could never be repaired. As Oprah's sense of remorse still hung over an already heavy atmosphere, the story took another turn. Because behind all the emotions and controversies, what transformed this event into an earthquake never before seen in the history of the British royal family was the legal dimension. That was the foundation that made King Charles's decision so explosive. And to understand why the king chose to confront Meghan Markle directly in the year 2025, one must look deeply into the legal system of the United Kingdom, where concepts that seem dry on the surface carry devastating power over the reputation of any individual or institution. The core of this lawsuit lies in the Defamation Act of the year 2013, a law considered a turning point in how the United Kingdom handles disputes regarding honor and reputation. Within that law, there is one phrase that has become the soul of the entire legal argument. It is serious harm, meaning harm of a severe nature. An accusation is considered defamatory only if it causes real and measurable damage to the reputation of the person mentioned. The king and his legal team relied on this very concept to sue Meghan. They argued that the accusations of racism and the neglect of mental health raised by Meghan in the interview of the year 2021 did not merely cause temporary media uproar. They destabilized public trust in the entire monarchy. Inside the private meetings at Clarence House, the royal lawyers analyzed every detail. They emphasized that Meghan had not provided any clear evidence for those shocking accusations. There were no leaked emails, no internal messages, no confirming witnesses. Everything stopped at her words alone. For a family that operates on symbolism and prestige, that testimony eroded the monarchy's image on the international stage. One lawyer even stated directly in the meeting that this was a textbook example of serious harm, and that if they did not file a lawsuit, the monarchy would be trapped inside a narrative created by someone else. Charles listened to that for a long time, and his team believed that the silence in that moment was when the king decided that patience had to end. What made the lawsuit even more important for the royal family was the scale of its influence. What Meghan said had gone far beyond the borders of the United Kingdom and had become a topic in the United States and in many English-speaking countries. The lawyers pointed out that this international spread increased the level of damage according to the legal standards of the act. For the court, harm to reputation is not measured only within the country. It is measured by the weight of global public opinion. This was an argument that Charles's side believed would become a powerful weapon once the lawsuit reached the courtroom. Not only that, this lawsuit could bring enormous financial consequences for Meghan. In the United Kingdom, legal fees for defamation cases are among the most expensive in the world. If she lost the case, Meghan would not only have to pay damages, but also cover all legal costs for the claimant. Media experts predicted that the amount could reach several million pounds. Some even expressed concern that Meghan might be forced to present evidence in court, something that many internal sources believed could open the door to secrets about the Sussex family that had never been revealed before. However, for Charles, money was not the reason he acted. From the king's perspective, this was a battle to regain control of the narrative. The interview with Oprah, the Netflix documentary series, and the memoir Spare had shifted the monarchy's image in a way he could no longer accept. For him, the law was not only a tool but also a shield to protect the legacy of the royal family. For that reason, when he signed the lawsuit documents, he believed he was doing what was necessary to protect the truth. But would the public see this in the same way the king saw it? That was the key question, and the answer was not simple. Because when the lawsuit was announced, the public reaction revealed a far more complicated picture. Right after the legal analysis was released, and the fact that King Charles III officially filed the lawsuit against Meghan Markle became irreversible, the atmosphere in the United Kingdom changed instantly. From the old pubs in London to the prime-time commentary programs on television, people began to divide into clear sides. The previous part showed why this lawsuit had a solid legal foundation and why the king believed that silence was no longer a safe choice. And from that moment, the public reaction erupted like a final aftershock and shook every layer of society. In the United Kingdom, support for the king surged. Public surveys in October showed that up to 68% of the population stood with Charles. They believed it was time for the monarchy to defend its honor against accusations that most people viewed as unfair. William also unexpectedly benefited from the lawsuit. His approval rating reached 70%, a number that stunned many analysts. A large portion of the British public believed William had been right to maintain a firm stance from the beginning against the Sussex revelations. In complete contrast, Meghan was left with only 21% approval. Those who once sympathized with her began to doubt. Some people even said directly on television that they were tired of seeing the royal family repeatedly dragged into media chaos caused by unverified claims. However, when crossing the Atlantic, the picture was entirely different. In the United States, especially within progressive communities and feminist movements, Meghan was still seen as a symbol against prejudice. Many organizations argued that she was facing the force of an old, traditional institution that struggled to accept differences. Some American scholars even claimed that the king's lawsuit could make Western audiences view the monarchy with greater skepticism, especially in a time when issues of equality and freedom of expression were receiving intense attention. On social media, hashtags supporting Meghan appeared densely again. Some even warned that if the lawsuit went too far, it could become the final breaking point that sent American public sentiment toward the British royal family into a steep decline. Meanwhile, media experts and royal scholars issued more serious warnings. They argued that although Charles might win in legal terms, he faced the risk of losing globally in terms of image. The reputation of the monarchy, built over centuries, could be restricted by this very lawsuit. Some commentators called it a double-edged sword. If he won, the king would regain his standing. But if he lost, or if unexpected developments occurred, the consequences would spread across generations. And amid all the noise of public debate, a larger question slowly began to form. What future would all of this lead the British royal family toward? And what was the greatest lesson after this unprecedented legal battle? Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time, a reigning king has brought his own daughter-in-law before the court. That fact alone reveals the level of fracture and crisis the royal family is facing. The lawsuit is not merely a dispute over accusations or violations of privacy. It is a battle to reclaim control over the narrative. Who will speak the official truth? Who will be believed? Who will decide the image of the monarchy in the eyes of the world? The meaning of this lawsuit goes far beyond a family tragedy. It reminds us of the fragility of the people standing behind the strongest symbol of the United Kingdom. A family that seems invincible can still be wounded by words, by misunderstandings, and by the truths no one wants to face. When every action they take is placed under public scrutiny, the loneliness and pressure become harsher, making any conflict easily turn into a media storm. And when the lawsuit reaches its conclusion, people realize that no verdict can truly mend fractures that have lasted for too long. Power can impose silence. Justice can provide an answer. But family bonds cannot be restored by a court ruling or a press conference. The question left for all of us is whether in the battle between truth, emotion, and power, anyone can truly emerge as the winner, or whether everyone is simply trying to protect their own version of the story, even if that unintentionally hurts those who share their blood. Because when the doors of Buckingham Palace close at the end of the day, what a family needs most is not a legal victory, not powerful statements, but the ability to see each other as human beings searching for peace and understanding. And perhaps that is the most luxurious thing the royal family lacks at this moment. The channel closes with a familiar reminder that behind every throne is a heart longing to be understood. And the story of the royal family, after all, is still just the story of people trying to find where they truly belong.